First up, JM sent in this one from 5 Minute Crafts. This is just ridiculous and it's dangerous. Yes, it's demonstrating that if you add more salt to water, it is more conductive. Do you need to do that using mains power? No, it's completely unsafe. You could do this using a small light globe and a battery, and then you're not risking people's lives. Putting these sort of videos online is just ridiculous. Moving on, Cheyenne sent in this one. They're wrapping pastry around a glass and it looks like they're trying to make cream horns. You can get a metal mould for this, but I totally get that you don't want to buy a separate mould for making a recipe just one time. That was definitely a fake video though, and let me show you why. I bought these glasses from a second-hand store and I'm wrapping the pastry around them. So far so good. You'll need the oven shelf cold, otherwise you're going to burn yourself while trying to get it in here. And then we'll let those bake on high heat. And can you spot the problem yet? That's now baked and hot. The question is, how do you get this off the glass? Because it's got a base, so you can't push it down, but this bit at the bottom of the pastry is smaller than the top, so we can't pull it up. So the only option I've got is to cut this off the glass, which is definitely not what they had pictured in their video. Because I like to give things every chance of working, I did try this again, wrapping the pastry much more loosely, but that doesn't work either. If you don't have the metal cone and you want to make one of these, you could just make yourself a cone out of aluminium foil or use the top of a glass bottle or a thin can covered in foil. Any of those will work perfectly well for you.
Yum.
Next, Rachel wants to know if this works.
Melt the caramels in boiling water. Tear open the bag and drizzle the baking paper with caramel. Roll tightly and chill the roll. Coat the roll in a caramel crust.
Let's try. So I've gone and bought an oven-proof bag and put the candies in it and put that in boiling water. The immediate red flag I have is that caramel has a very high melting point and boiling water is not hot enough to melt caramel. After 8 minutes, if we turn it over, you can see the ones that were in direct contact with the pan are melting, but not the ones on top. 13 minutes later and we have this. It's not going to melt like this. If we get rid of all the water and the bag and put the caramels straight into the pan, you can melt it like that, but do be careful because this is very, very hot, hotter than boiling water. You can then use a spoon to drizzle this onto baking paper. I definitely would not recommend putting it in a bag and poking holes in it because the burn risk is just too high. And because they were hard caramels, this will set hard. They're going to be brittle. There's no way you can roll this around a cake. If you wanted to make a softer caramel from these, you'd have to add more liquid to it, like more cream or more water, which is definitely not what they showed in their video. So once again, this one is fake. Quite some time ago, Kerosina's sent in a request asking, could I figure out how to make the Japanese chocolate infused strawberries? Finally, when we were in Japan, I managed to find some of those strawberries. These are really unusual. They're not chocolate coated. Instead, the chocolate goes all the way through the strawberry. These cost about $6 Australian per strawberry, so they're pretty pricey. And Kerosina said she already searched online and couldn't find any information as to how they were made. So let's see if we can figure it out. It says on the packet that they're freeze-dried, so we should probably start with that. There are a bunch of videos online at the moment that say you can freeze-dry without having a machine.
All you have to do is put your Skittles in the freezer, and after 24 hours, you take them out and put them in the dryer. You're supposed to let it spin for about 10 minutes so it can really cook. It looks like our Skittles are all ready. Let's see if this works.
Look at that.
Okay, guys, moment of truth. I'm so excited to see if this works.
No cap.
Oh
Look at
my
that.
gosh. It actually made freeze-dried Skittles.
That's just not going to work, but let's try it. I put these Skittles in the freezer last night and now we can put them in the clothes dryer for a long time and we get damaged Skittles. They have this powdery coating from being bashed around in the clothes dryer. That is not how freeze drying works. In order to figure out how to make these strawberries, we are actually going to need a proper freeze drying machine. I don't have one, so I reached out to Harvest Right, and I want to say a huge thank you to them for coming to the party and sending one over for us to experiment with. I'll put a link to their website below so you can get one yourself if you want to start a freeze drying business. Let's start with some strawberries. I'm going to freeze these first and then put them in the machine, and if I time lapse this, you can see them kind of drying out, which they are, but it's not the same as dehydrating. They keep their shape and they end up crisp like this. And you have to store them in a sealed bag or a jar, or they'll absorb moisture from the air and go soft again. But in order for us to actually see what's going on when we freeze dry, I think I'm going to need to freeze dry some water. So we'll start with some ice cubes. In the first stage, the machine drops to a very low temperature just to make sure all the water in the food is frozen. Then the vacuum pump turns on and pulls a vacuum. Next, the trays heat up. Now, normally if you put ice on a hot tray, you'd of course get a puddle of water. But you'll notice here, that's not happening. In the low pressure of a vacuum, water sublimates, or it goes straight from solid ice into gas, into water vapor. It skips that liquid water stage altogether. And if you're wondering where that water vapor ends up, it hits the freezing cold walls of the chamber and turns back into ice. This whole process for something that has quite a lot of water in it, like ice, takes between 15 and 20 hours. And if I zoom right in, you can see that once the water is all disappearing, we're left with some crystals, a fine powder of minerals that were in the tap water. So we've freeze-dried the strawberry and successfully pulled all the water out of it. The question is now, how do we get chocolate into where the water once was? Jonathan had this idea.
I'm going to freeze-dried strawberries, but while they're freeze-drying, I'm going to put a white chocolate chip on top of them. That way the chocolate melts into the strawberry, and then all the moisture is pulled out. So you've got white chocolate infused freeze-dried strawberries. Yeah.
He didn't post any follow-up videos to that, so I can only assume that it didn't work for him. Chocolate doesn't really freeze dry. It doesn't have much water in it at all, so it basically just warms up and melts, and that's about it. But because the trays stay hot for quite a long time, you can overheat the chocolate and make it go kind of seized and not so nice. So putting it under the strawberry or on the strawberry is just not going to work. It's not going to draw it in. We're going to need to surround the strawberry. But the first experiment I want to do is to do that with oil so I can see what's happening. Chocolate is quite fatty, so let's give it a go. The freeze-dried strawberry is full of air, so it's going to float. We're going to need to weigh it down. Next, I'm going to put it in the freeze dryer with no cold, no heat, just pulling a vacuum. And you can see as the air is sucked out of the chamber, we get all these bubbles of air coming from the oil and out of the strawberry. At this stage, the strawberry is still completely dry, but I'm hoping that the oil will be drawn into it when we turn the vacuum off. I'm going to slowly open the valve and let the air pressure go back to normal. Let's wipe the oil off the outside and see if it worked. That sounds different, and the oil is all the way through. That's promising, but chocolate is a lot thicker than oil, and generally the more viscous something is, the harder it is to infuse into something, so I'm not celebrating yet. Let's give it a go with some white chocolate. Attempt 1. The bubbles made the spanner move and our strawberry floated, so that's a fail. Attempt 2. I made a cage to hold the strawberry down under the chocolate. That seems to have worked, maybe. It kind of looks like mainly fat is infused. This is what it looked like once it was set. White chocolate doesn't have any cocoa solids in it, so let's try it with dark chocolate to see if any of that cocoa gets into the strawberry. And it looks like the strawberry was crushed when the vacuum was released, and the chocolate has stayed on the outside, so that's a fail. For attempt 4, I thinned the chocolate down with some extra cocoa butter, but it's also a fail. For attempt 5, it's flattened again. Maybe I need to release the vacuum more slowly. For attempt 6, I released the vacuum slower and pulled a vacuum twice. It's still a fail, but it's the best we've had so far. Releasing the pressure slowly takes a really long time for it to get back down to normal air pressure. So at this point, I think I need to understand when in that process, at what pressure is it getting drawn into the strawberry? Is it at the beginning? Is it at the end? Is it in the middle? Is it the whole time? So let's do an experiment with a balloon and see if we can visualize what's going on. If I put a partially inflated balloon in there, when the vacuum pump is turned on, the pressure in the chamber decreases and the air inside the balloon can expand. And then when I turn the pump off, this is interesting, even if I leave the valve completely closed, the balloon is getting smaller again. So that means the chamber is not holding the vacuum pressure. So I think this time I will try just turning off the vacuum but not opening the valve at all, just waiting 5 minutes and then turning on the vacuum again till it gets up to full pressure, then turning it off, don't open the valve, wait 5 minutes and then open it. Let's see if that worked. Yay! We have success! We did it! I'll put all the details that worked on my website for you. I did also try it with a bigger batch, scaling it up, and I found that in the same batch, some of them infused perfectly and others not so well. I did have 2 different breeds of strawberries in there, and some of them I'd initially freeze-dried to extra dry and some just standard, and I think the extra dry ones worked better. Certainly if you want to do it commercially, you're going to have to do a few more experiments of your own just to tweak it so that you can sell those knowing they're fully infused. We did of course also freeze dry some candy because that's what you just have to do. It has a different setting on the machine for candy because it's quite a different process. You don't have to freeze it first because it's got hardly any water in it. The candy just heats up so that it's a bit more stretchy, and then the vacuum kicks in so it expands and you have these cool looking things, and then they have to stay in there to dry out. If you're wondering if you could just do that under a vacuum, it will expand under a vacuum, but without the setting to dry it out that the freeze dryer has, it's just going to collapse back down once you release that vacuum. Next, Lilac sent in this one.
When the blender stops working properly, just tear a few sheets of aluminum foil into smaller pieces. Then, place them in the blender jar. Now, turn on the appliance and blend the small pieces of aluminum foil. It's best to use a low speed. See the shavings that form during the sharpening process. After a moment, remove the blended foil from the blender. You can now check the blades. They will be like new.
If we pause that video so we can compare the before and the after, neither shot is in enough detail for us to see if anything has really changed. Now, if you do a Google search and ask, can you sharpen blender blades with foil? The Google AI overview says, yes, you can. The friction helps hone the blade edges, and this video demonstrates how to sharpen your blender blades with foil, and it links to the video that we've just watched. Now, keep in mind that 80% of search results now are ending with what Google AI says. People are not digging any further than that. So if there's misinformation, we're just getting a misinformation loop here. Watch what happens if I ask, isn't this a fake hack that could blunt your blades? Now it says yes, it's largely considered to be a myth by experts and engineers and can indeed dull or damage your blades over time. So we've got 2 opposite answers there. One was from experts and engineers and one was from a YouTube hack video. Why did it choose this one? Let's ask one more question. Does Google's AI results favour YouTube videos? Yes, it does. Google owns YouTube, so by recommending the YouTube video, it's going to make more money from that search result, even though in this case, it could tell it was in contradiction to what experts in the area had said. So that would then appear that somewhere in the programming of the Google AI algorithm, it was told to favour things that were going to make Google more money. At this point, Google has gone from initially being a search engine that shows you everything that is on the internet to purely a billboard for adverts for whoever pays the most to now AI summarised results that are going to make them the most money. I don't know why I expected any better, but it's still disappointing. Next, Dean from the UK wants to know if this is true.
Cadbury was bought by Kraft Foods in 2010, which merged with Heinz to become Kraft Heinz. Since the takeover, the recipe has been quietly changed. The chocolate now contains vegetable fats in addition to cocoa butter. This means it's technically not even pure chocolate, according to European standards.
I bought this chocolate from our local store, and if we take a look at the ingredients, you can see it's full cream milk, sugar, cocoa butter, cocoa mass, and milk solids and emulsifiers. So nothing's changed there. It's still cocoa butter. But I also bought this bar imported from the UK, and if we flip that over and look at the ingredients, it's milk, sugar, cocoa butter, cocoa mass, vegetable fats, palm, and shea and emulsifiers. So they've still got some cocoa butter, but they've switched some of the fat out for vegetable fats. So that video was true. Hershey's has also been in the news for doing the same thing with some of their products.
If it doesn't say milk chocolate, then it doesn't have cocoa butter, and they're using vegetable oils. They also no longer use milk chocolate on Almond Joy. They no longer use milk chocolate on Pound. It's across board. Mr. Goodbar, no longer milk chocolate.
Hershey says they are going to return those products to cocoa butter by the end of 2027. Some have suggested that that deadline is so far away, they're just hoping that everyone's forgotten about it by then so they can keep using the vegetable fat, which is much, much cheaper. They've also said that their main products, like the Hershey's Kisses, haven't changed and that it's the same recipe, just cocoa butter. But some people are questioning whether that's true.
I've had these Hershey Kisses in the oven. I even turned the heat up halfway through for 20 minutes and they will not melt at all. They're just crumbling. They're hot, they're not melting at all. So tell me what they're making them out of now, because it's not real food.
The Hershey Kisses I got say they are milk chocolate made from sugar, milk, cocoa mass, cocoa butter, milk fat and emulsifiers. So there's no vegetable fat in this one, so let's do a melt test. We're comparing Australian Cadbury to UK Cadbury to the US Hershey's Kiss. This is heating from underneath and it doesn't look like much is happening, but if I press, that one is liquid now. This one, not so much. And this one has melted to a thicker paste-like consistency. The middle one is definitely the thickest and hardest though. So the Hershey Kisses do melt. They're not as fluid when they're melted as the Australian chocolate is, but they're certainly not set hard. So what was going on in that video when they're trying to bake them in the oven? If you heat up any chocolate for too long, it is going to seize and basically start to burn the chocolate. So then it will go hard like that. Let's do a melt test with those three chocolates at 37 degrees or around there, which is body temperature. So this is going to see what happens when you put that chocolate in your mouth. After 1 minute, the Australian Cadbury is thin and runny. Both the UK Cadburys and the Hershey's are much, much thicker at body temperature, which means it has a completely different mouthfeel. If it doesn't easily melt in your mouth, it gives it a lot more of a waxy feel, and you don't get as much of the intense chocolate flavour because it can't coat your taste buds in quite the same way. We know why the UK chocolate was thicker. It has the vegetable fats, not just the cocoa butter, but why was the Hershey's chocolate thicker? I'm not sure on that one because according to the packet it has a very similar percentage of fat, sugar, protein as the Australian one does. It could be something that we don't have access to the information of. For example, a breakdown of how much milk fat there is compared to the amount of cocoa butter in it, maybe a difference in the amount of emulsifier that's being used, or even a difference in the tempering process that's used for the chocolate. All of those things we can't tell from the label, so I can't tell you for certain. Next, Emma wants to know if this is true.
This is how you bloom your cocoa. You need really, really hot liquid. You can use water or milk. I whisk it into a paste and that goes into my batter with all my wet ingredients. That heat, it opens up those cocoa particles and releases those fats and flavor compounds that would otherwise just sit there locked up when it's dry. And it makes it taste more like chocolate. And let me tell you, the difference is not subtle. You're gonna get a deeper color, a richer flavor, and a much more moisture crumb every single time.
There are quite a few videos online that claim this, that you need to bloom the cocoa in hot liquid first in order to release that chocolate flavour in your baked goods. Surprisingly though, when I search through the scientific literature, I can't find anything that actually backs this up. And to my brain, it doesn't make logical sense because we're going to bake it in the oven anyway. So if it needs heat to release the flavour, it's going to get the heat at the next step. But cooking is complicated, food science is very complex, so things can have surprising results. Let's test it out. My chocolate cake recipe doesn't have any milk or water in it, so I'm going to make the Betty Crocker recipe. I'm making it twice, and for one, I'm blooming the cocoa in hot water first and covering it and letting that cool, and for the other one, I'm adding the cocoa powder in with the dry ingredients like the recipe says, and then mix all of those together. The cake batter that is made with the bloomed cocoa does look darker and more chocolatey. We'll bake those in the same oven for the same amount of time. This is the wet cocoa and this is the dry. I'm not loving the actual recipe, it's quite a cracked looking cake. If we cut them open, to me the crumb colour looks pretty similar. What do you think? I think we need to do a triangle taste test to see if our taste testers can tell them apart. In this test, A and B are the same. They're both made with the dry cocoa, and C is the one made with the wet bloomed cocoa. So this is a triangle taste test. You know how it works. I need to know which one's different.
Oh, all right. A chocolate cake.
I think that B and C are the same and that A is different.
C was actually different.
Oh.
So you're saying you can't really tell the difference between them?
No. Was there a difference?
They look very similar. That's B. Chocolate cake.
I'm going to go with C is different, but it's very hard. And it's mainly off the texture too.
I think A and B are the same and C is different.
That's C, it's chocolate cake.
They're all the same. Maybe C's a little different. I don't know.
In what way?
Not as flavoursome.
So not a profound difference between them?
Nah. I think that, yeah, C is less chocolate.
B and A are more moist. They taste more chocolatey.
You were right. C was different. Which one do you prefer?
Probably A and B.
So for that particular recipe, blooming the cocoa did not have the desired effect. It apparently tasted less chocolatey, but the difference was not profound, it was only slight. If you're not happy with the taste of the chocolate cake you make, I suggest trying a different recipe. That's going to have a much bigger effect on what it tastes like. My chocolate cake recipe and chocolate brownie recipe are all on my website. I can link to them below if you want to try those out. With thanks to my amazing patrons for all of your support. You guys are absolute legends and I really appreciate you. Make it a great week by being kind to others, and I'll see you on Friday.